And welcome to Triple R again. It's great to have you back here in Melbourne for many times. We've been here many times now, haven't you, Mark, online from the Corner Hotel?
Yeah. We played the Corner Hotel last time we were here.
Yes, yeah. You're almost locals, aren't you? This is, as we were saying before, just off air, about the sixth or so visit that Mudhoney have made to Melbourne over the last 23 years that the band have been together.
Yeah.
And you actually got out to Australia pretty quick smart, didn't you, after the band formed?
We did. And, we were pretty amazed and stoked to come down because we were huge fans of what was happening in Australia in the 70s and mid-80s, so, we were ready to come down.
Yeah, I mean, it's always sort of seemed that you've had a very strong aesthetic, I don't know, perhaps spiritual connection with Australian music, haven't you? I mean, you became very good friends with the Cosmic Psychos early on.
Yeah, Cosmic Psychos. Tons of people. I can't.
It's hard to know where to start, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how did you kind of connect with Australian punk and sort of hard rock in that late 70s, early 80s period? As a kid in Seattle, was it sort of through buying records, or?
Yeah, it was totally through buying records. And I think for us that the Saints and the Birthday Party were like the gateway drug.
Yeah.
And just it became quickly apparent that like a lot of really good stuff was coming out of Australia, and the records were available on import. They were kind of expensive, but they were worth taking a chance on. You had better luck on getting Australian records than you did like getting British records at the time.
Why was that? Was it better?
Because the British records were just sort of effete pop, and Australian records were like way either out there or harder rocking. Went from like the gamut from like the Fungus Brains to Feed Time.
Yes, but that's all pretty very small sort of independent releases that kind of made their way around the world, isn't it? In the days before the internet.
Yeah, I don't understand the internet age, so I understand that the fanzine age of the 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, the internet age is overwhelming to me. Like, there's so many bands, and everybody's got like a MySpace page or a Facebook page, and I don't know how you even sift through it all.
Well, that's right. There's a proliferation of music available all over the place, and that doesn't mean that all of it is good, does it?
No. Well, I think in any genre or whatever, like maybe 90% of it's shit.
Yes. So maybe the days when it was a little harder to release music, in terms of having to find a label to put it out as against being able to just whack it up on, digitally, was a good thing in terms of, a sort of curatorial point of view from label owners.
You didn't have to sign to a label. I mean, you could start your own label.
Yes.
You just had to want to do it bad enough. And, I admire bands who are in it not for any kind of reward, but in it for the sake of itself.
Well, you'd have to say that was true of Mudhoney over the years, wouldn't you? Because it's been a long journey for the band. Was 23 odd years or so together?
Yeah, almost 24 now.
Yeah, and 10 or so albums. What's kept Mudhoney going?
I'm not quite sure. We still we love to do what we do, and we still have the opportunity to like go places and play shows that are very, very far from our home, and we're psyched to do it. We like playing with each other, and I think that's just essentially what it comes down to.
Of course, but a lot of bands that were of your era have since folded, haven't they? And I guess it's been a bit of a...
Yeah, but some of those bands, well, there was a suicide in one. And other bands, like, I think they were aiming for something.
Well, would you say, I mean, the interesting thing about the sort of Seattle scene of the late 80s and into the 90s was there seemed to be a split between a lot of small independent bands that were championed, say, by labels like Sub Pop and a myriad of other independent labels. And then there were a whole lot of bands that perhaps aspired to greater success. And I wonder whether there was sort of an aesthetic kind of split in the scene between those two things, and I suppose there were bands like Soundgarden and Pearl Jam, etc., who did find enormous success, and of course Nirvana too. You sort of sat somewhere in the middle of that, didn't you?
Yeah, I don't know. When we started, we were just sort of lucky. We were we were good friends with Bruce and Jonathan, who were just starting Sub Pop. Green River had just broken up, and they trusted, that like Steve and I and Dan and Matt the band that we had would be a good one. And they, I tried to play. I remember trying to play a cassette of a practice recorded on a boombox that basically sounded like to Bruce Pavitt one time.
So nothing's changed.
No. I mean, it was just like this noise that he couldn't tell what was going on, and he's just like, "Well, why don't you just go into reciprocal and record with Jack and Dino?
Yeah.
We'll pay for it." And it was all just him trusting us, and that was our first single.
Yeah, right. So I mean, that was probably indicative of his attitude to a lot of bands, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
At the time things were pretty loose.
Well, Sub Pop nearly went under a number of times, didn't it?
So they say.
Right.
I mean, we left Sub Pop because we thought the label was going under.
Right. And you went off and had a little dalliance with a major, didn't you, for a few albums?
Like 3 albums in about 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I mean, you were very prolific at that period, actually. I was taking a look at the sort of span of your releases. You put out
we were very prolific until, the last decade,
right.
until the turn of the millennium.
Yeah, things have quietened down a bit in terms of how often you record. Why is that?
Well, there's no pressure.
Yeah.
And not that there really was any pressure, but it wasn't like, when we were younger, that was our only source of income. Like, I didn't work a day job for 10 years, so, we just had to keep kind of, putting out records and going out on tour. And at this point, I think the fact that there is no thought of, like, who our audience is or what we're trying to, that we're trying to, like, expand and get a wider audience, we just get to do whatever the hell it is we want and hope people are along for the ride.
Yes, it must be kind of tremendously liberating and
in a musical sense, it definitely is.
Yeah, and different, I expect, from... I mean, what did it feel like in those years that you were on a major label when you were signed at the sort of height of the whole grunge thing?
Well,
was there a lot of pressure?
No, not at all. They didn't know, after Nevermind, they didn't know what was happening. The people who were running major labels, they just didn't understand it at all, and they're just like, they knew we had a certain amount of popularity, an underground popularity, so they just kind of let us do what we did. We went into the same studio that we recorded the previous record for Sub Pop, which was in Conrad Uno's basement. They didn't send anybody up from the label to oversee the recordings or anything. They gave us free rein until the very, very last record we did with them.
Right. Okay. So you kind of got lucky, I suppose.
Yeah, we got incredibly lucky because you hear all kinds of horror stories.
Yes, it's been a lot of anniversaries of late, hasn't there, of bands that sort of started in the late 80s around the Seattle sort of, the Super Suckers, and the Melvins had 25-year anniversary not long ago.
Uh-huh.
This year was the 20th anniversary of Nevermind. And Pearl Jam have been touring around celebrating 20 years together. What, did you have a 20-year celebration?
Well, I think in our own way we did, right. Probably. We didn't. At the 20-year mark, pretty much, that's when the Lucky Ones came out and the Superfuzz Big Muff reissue came out. So that's, kind of a 20th anniversary sort of thing.
Yeah, X marks the spot.
Yeah.
And you've been playing Superfuzz Big Muff. We played it, and when I say it's in entirety, it's reasonably short, isn't it?
Yeah. We did a couple of shows for the All Tomorrow's Parties folks.
Yeah.
For their Don't Look Back series, and they had us play Superfuzz Big Muff plus early singles.
What does Mark Arm, these days think of the nascent songwriter that was Mark Arm, when Superfuzz came out in the late 80s?
There are some songs that, like the song Need in particular, like the lyrics make me cringe. It's so overly dramatic and unnecessary.
Right. But the other, I mean, obviously it must be a release you can be incredibly proud of. It must have been fun playing that EP over again.
Well, the last time we did it, we played on the same night as the Scientists and the Stooges.
Oh, cool!
And it was like never in my wildest dreams, when the band was starting, would I have imagined this happening. Like I never thought I would see either the Stooges or the Scientists.
Wait, which album did they play? Stooges? Was it Raw Power? Or?
Raw Power, yeah. It was after Ron died, so it was James Williamson lineup.
Fantastic. So that was part of the All Tomorrow's Parties thing, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was in New York, upstate New York.
Did you want to be Iggy when you were a teenager? Did you want to be Iggy when you were a teenager?
When I was a teenager, I think it was more like in my 20s that I was really, like, maybe when I was about 19 is when I first heard the Stooges.
Yeah, right.
So, when I was a teenager, I was just listening to, like, shitty radio rock for the most part.
Right, okay. When you got a little more cashed up, you could go out and pursue some of the releases, yeah. You've been touring with Pearl Jam this year, haven't you?
Yeah, we did. We played their 20th anniversary shows in Wisconsin, and then did a whole Canadian tour with them.
That must be. I mean, it must be a kind of a special thing to have had such a long friendship or relationship with those guys, because of course it goes right back to the days when you were in Green River with a couple of members of. Yeah, I mean for Pearl Jam.
For Steve and Stone, it goes farther back than that. They went to high school together.
Yeah, is that right?
Yeah.
Have you been friends for that period of time, or was there a period where you didn't see each other so much?
I think there was probably like maybe the Mother Love Bone years and like the early Mudhoney years where we didn't really run into each other that much, but that was a long, long time ago.
I mean, I guess I'm interested in that period, in that, thinking about Green River and the split that occurred, in Green River when you went off and formed Mudhoney, and Stone and Jeff went off and eventually, formed Pearl Jam. It seemed that there was kind of a difference of opinion, it seemed. That's what's always been written about the direction that Green River should go, and in the sense that they always, perhaps, with Pearl Jam, had a much more sort of mainstream approach to music making than, say, the one that you pursued with Mudhoney. Would you say that there was a kind of...
I don't know, when the band split up, like, Jeff and Stone were really into, like, Jane's Addiction and Zodiac Mind Warp, know. I mean, those weren't, like, at the time, they weren't huge bands.
Yeah.
Jane's Addiction wasn't, I think, maybe didn't even have their first record out yet. So it was more of a difference of opinion than like a, who's the sellout kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was getting into Feed Time, which is very different than...
Yes, indeed.
than Zodiac Mind Warp and Jane's Addiction. I mean, it's very reduced music, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. And fast forward to now, the last release you put out was a few years ago now, wasn't it, Mark? The Lucky Ones album, and while a lot of bands seem to spend more time in the studio as they go on, you actually spent the least amount of time recording this one, which is perverse.
Well, it just it went really quickly. I think mainly because I wasn't playing guitar and I was just able to just concentrate on vocals and.
Right. Okay. And you just wanted to sort of step back from it, did you?
Yeah. When we worked on that batch of songs, we thought, like, normally we just kind of like jam out a riff for a long time and then put it on tape and have to come up with lyrics. And we kind of thought it might be quicker to write songs if I just sort of tried to kind of come up with stuff on the spot and I didn't necessarily come up with the whole song on the spot, but maybe like at least a melody line for the vocals or like a line or two that would like start off a song, song lyric, So, I think we actually need to do that again soon because it's been too long.
It has been too long. What's keeping you out of the studio?
It's our own inability to, like Steve moved down to Portland, which is 3 hours away from Seattle, so every time we practice, it's a 6-hour round trip for him. Mm-hmm. So that makes our practices less frequent. That's one thing. And I don't know, we've got to actually have a bunch of music down and recorded on our little digital recording device, but I have to come up with a bunch of lyrics.
Right, okay. Well, it's great that you can have a kind of cavalier approach to recording and just get into the studio, get together when you feel like it. It must make
I want our next record to be a good one. I don't want it to be a half-assed thing that we, put together because, it's time to put out another record.
Yeah, absolutely, which, may have been the case, years ago. And Mark, you haven't played the Meredith Music Festival before, so that's going to be a pretty special event.
Oh, I'm stoked. We're going down early so we can see Off, and we're going to stay late so we can see Grinderman.
Yeah, of course. That will be a ripper performance in the dust and the dirt of the Meredith Festival. And in terms of the set that you're drawing on these days, is that you're pulling from stuff right throughout the Mudhoney back catalogue?
Yeah, and the back catalogue and the front catalogue.
Right. Well, we're going to go out with a track from Super Fuzz Big Muff because the deluxe edition was reissued. And were you a part of kind of putting all that together? There was some B-sides included, weren't there, or outtakes?
Very much so. Yeah. I work at Sub Pop.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, I work in the warehouse there, so I was very involved with, I was working at the warehouse, and I looked at the Super Fuzz Big Muff CD that Sub Pop had done in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And I probably had never looked at it closely because to me that was, it's years old, and I realized that they had put the A-side as the B-side, got the track order wrong on it. And I was like, this needs to be changed.
Is that right? So what? That
was kind of, I think, the germs of the beginning of the idea for doing the deluxe package and the remastering.
Yes. You said they did that on the CD, but not the vinyl.
Well, no, the vinyl was, the vinyl existed, came out in
originally,
1988,
yes. Yeah. Well, good on you for righting those wrongs.
Yeah.
It's going to be great to see you performing this evening. I hope you have a great gig at the corner and enjoy yourself at...
I'm sure we will. All the shows here in Australia have been fucking amazing.
Yeah. Well, we love you here, Mark, so thanks for coming back to...
We love it here.
Thanks for coming back to our shores.